Hello everyone and welcome to a One Controller Port overview video. I'm Benjamin Yoder here today to talk to you about Jeep Thrills. Now I know some of the more recent videos have been very meme-ish on the channel lately about this game, but really this is a pretty solid game, so I want to give it what it deserves and give it a good fair shake as we talk about it here today. So if you're not aware what Jeep Thrills is, it's a Wii shovelware title put out by DSi Games, who's typically known for shovelware on platforms like the GBA, Wii, DS. This is a game that if you try to pick it up, at least in this year of 2020, it's like, $1 to $5. You can easily find it on like a GameStop used Wii game shelf kind of thing. And it's very tempting to kind of compare this game to like a poor man's Excite Truck. I would definitely kind of fight back against that perception because Excite Truck's a very unique game in terms of how it operates and how you play that game in a lot of ways. So I will have a video at the end of this linked for Excite Truck if you're curious about my thoughts on Excite Truck. But really what Jeep Thrills is really a stock racing game without that many bells and whistles. Kind of the big sell here is that this is a Jeep branded game. So Jeep, the actual car brand, is involved in this title. This includes real Jeep cars at the vehicles, as well as some concept cars as well. And because it's kind of, set in that Jeep brand, it definitely focuses around like real world locales. There's a lot of ruins, forests, snowfields, things like that. Although when it comes to like the map structure, it's definitely a lot more arcadey. There's a lot of jumps. There's a lot of like caves and caverns you can go through. And there's also like shortcuts and stuff, but it's one of those games where the shortcuts are kind of like you have to pick the right shortcut or else you're just automatically losing time. So you kind of want to memorize these tracks and figure out like what the best path is through them. Really the most unrealistic thing about this game, other than the jumps, is the fact that there's a boost meter in this game. So while you're driving, if you have a boost meter that fills up over time, how quickly it fills is based off your car's boost stats that it has, depending on which car you choose. But you can also fill up your boost by doing things like, jumps and get big air, and once you land, you'll get a bonus to your boost. There's no real limitations to how you use this boost. So what I mean by that is on the meter on the left, there's like these chunks of meter that they kind of segment, but they don't really mean anything. You can press the boost button at any time and it'll go ahead and expend whatever boost you have. So even if you only have half a bar of boost, you can use that boost if you want to. But it's not really a boost management game. There's not a lot of reason to keep your boost other than just to, use it where it's most effective. And so what that results in is a game that really focuses on just driving well. Now there is a PS2 version which would use normal controls, but I'm playing the Wii version of the game, so as you would expect, you tilt the Wii remote to turn left and right. You can use Wii Wheel because that's just a plastic accessory. And I would say overall the controls are pretty responsive. I think that maybe isn't clear at first though, because there's actually very little grip on a lot of these cars. When you turn, there's a little bit of wiggle room in terms of how your car will immediately respond to your turn, but you pretty quickly go into a drift. And drifting in this game is not like a Mario Kart or something like that. You don't maintain your speed, you don't get any kind of like special bonuses. Drifting slows you down. So when you're coming into these turns, you're really looking to minimize drift time, minimize the amount of speed lost, things like that. Sometimes that means, preemptively slowing down so make sure you don't come to a complete stop when you turn too hard kind of thing, right? So it does really focus on, you, the player, making sure you're coming into the turns at the right speed, at the right angle, and kind of managing those properly. I think this kind of approach is very interesting because I think it probably better mimics the real world in some ways, but it does kind of damper the adrenaline rush you get out of these kind of games sometimes. I think the reason why is because when you think about, say, a game like Mario Kart, when you're coming around a turn using the drift, you're getting that boost, you're getting like a speed boost from drifting well, and so you're really maximizing your speed. So even if you don't boost, the turn is still kind of a neutral turn for the most part. You don't gain anything, but you don't really lose anything either, as long as you don't mess up. In the case of Jeep Thrills, you're not really maximizing speed as you are minimizing speed lost. So even if you get through a turn perfectly, there's not a lot of satisfaction to that because it just kind of feels like you did the turn normally rather than, getting a bonus for doing it better. And so I think that makes it just not as exciting as a lot of other racing games, even though this game is very much like a arcade style racing game, kind of somewhat grounded in the real world. But it does make the turns very technical and very difficult to pull off well. And while the AI is usually pretty good at being consistent with these turns, they are not great at minimizing their speed loss. So I think that really balances out. This game's actually, I would say, pretty balanced overall in terms of the AI and the challenge that there is. Some of the tracks, they definitely take the longer path that they should go, or maybe slow down a little too much at individual turns, which kind of, gives them a pretty heavy disadvantage while you're racing. But the majority of the tracks are very challenging overall, and you'll be, trying pretty hard to remain in first. When it comes to visuals, being this game's also on the PlayStation 2, it's not a great looking game. There's a lot of pop-in, stuff like that too. It's just not an impressive looking game, and the game also struggles at times as well. There's frame rate issues, particularly when boosting, I think, around through a lot of other cars at the same time. But what I was surprised to find, there is actually car destruction in this game, which when I usually think of licensed car games, and maybe this is an outdated kind of view of licensed car games, I feel like they typically don't want to show destruction models on their real-world cars. This game, does do that, and it also does it, pretty well. It's not technically impressive per se, but it tracks, where you're getting hit. It shows like the paint job scraping off one side of the car if you run one side of the car into the mountainside or something like that. And so it's like context sensitive in terms of like how you're getting your car beat up and things like that. And it's kind of fun to look how bad of shape your car is in if you had a particularly bad race. But it's not a technically impressive addition there. The area variety is also kind of not great. Like I said, these are kind of based in real world locales, so there's not a lot of different kind of visual effects they can do outside of just kind of different weather and things like that. And also there's a lot of reused environments in the game. They take a lot of tracks they built out. They'll put new barricades to make new tracks on those, and sometimes it can be a little hard to remember like if you're driving down a part of the track and it's not really identifiable of which layout it is. There's times where you'll come up to a turn and it will be hard to see exactly where you should be going or which track you're on, and there's no like map or anything either, so you can't see like on a mini map where you should be turning as you like come up a hill or something like that. So there's a little bit of a challenge in terms of just like identifying where you should be going at times, but generally by lap 2 you've kind of figured it out. And if you're grinding a singular race trying to get first place in it, you'll kind of get a good idea of where you should be going on that track. Now the tracks are packed in groups. The initial grouping of these tracks basically just asks you to do a single race, and once you get first place, you unlock different cars. You also unlock tournaments, and the tournament play is probably where the main content of this game is. Basically, it's an entire league of tracks. It's usually somewhere between like 4 to 5 tracks, and you play them all in a row, and depending on what placing you get, you did a different number of points. It's very similar to like a Mario Kart style game if you ever did that. And as you get, gold medals in the tournaments, you unlock more cars. And, in terms of content, I'd say it lasts probably about a handful of hours in terms of what's there. Like I said, they kind of reuse some of the tracks to some degree. And unfortunately, to get 100% completion of this game, it seems like they've really asked you to perfect every single race. So that means getting first place in an entire tournament and an entire series kind of thing. So that's not something I didn't go out of my way to do. But in terms of, getting gold medals for everything, 100%ing on the tracks, I unlocked all the cars that were at least shown to me in that progress. Who knows, maybe if you 100% Jeep Thrills, you unlock Jeep Thrills 2 or something. But yeah, it's like a short and perfectly playable racing game. It's definitely cheap, but it's competent. The physics are fun and goofy in some ways, but not so much so that they're annoying or feel bad or something like that. And like I said, turning is a bit of a science, and I think the approach they took to turning in this game was a good way to kind of differentiate this, at least from other racing games that I'm familiar with on the platform. So while it's maybe worth, a couple bucks here and worth maybe checking out if you got some free time and just want to see some budget racing game, there's plenty of better ways to enjoy, like, Wii remote steering. You can just look at like Nintendo published titles alone and I think get a lot of satisfaction there. So that's it for this week. Thanks for coming. OneControlPort.com is the website. Like I said, I'll link my Excite Truck video at the end of this this video. And I also did a podcast at one point where I talked about the various racing games Nintendo published on the GameCube and kind of what I like about those games and how I think that that system had a nice variety of games with unique mechanics that kind of stood out. And in some ways, I feel like the GameCube might be kind of like the defining racing console when it comes to Nintendo published titles. So yeah. Anyways, that's it. Thanks for coming. I hope you have a great week. Bye.